A janitor? Playing that piano? The room laughed. They didn't know what was coming. She'd scrubbed that conservatory floor for 11 years. Never spoken, never seen. Just silence and a mop. Until one day, they pointed at the broken piano in the corner like it was a joke. Come on, show us what you've got. They thought it would be funny. They thought she'd be embarrassed. They didn't know. She used to be a prodigy. Why did she quit music? What happened in the next 3 minutes left the room breathless. One note, and their smiles vanished. No spotlight, no makeup, just trembling hands, and a melody. So raw, so heartbreaking, people started crying on live stream. And then she did the unthinkable. She entered Europe's most prestigious music competition with a song she wrote from the scars of her life. If you think talent has a look, comment below. If you've ever been underestimated, this one's for you. Stay to the end. The twist, even the judges cried. Vienna, the city where Mozart lived, where Beethoven walked blind through rain-soaked streets, where every corner whispers in B minor. In this city stands the Vienna Conservatory, a building that looks more like a cathedral than a school. Gold, leaf on ceilings, marble busts of dead geniuses in every hall. Here, music is religion, and students are gods in the making. And yet, a woman in a janitor's uniform walks these sacred halls every night, unblessed and unnoticed. Elena Petrova, 42, Eastern European, quiet, no known relatives, arrives at 6 p.m., leaves at 2 a.m. She cleans practice rooms after prodigies hammer out perfection. She wipes fingerprints off Steinways worth more than her life savings. She picks up discarded sheet music that most students don't even glance at twice. To them, she's just part of the background, like the flickering emergency lights or the faint smell of old varnish. But she wasn't always invisible. Back in Sofia years ago, before the accident, Elena was that girl, the one who played barefoot on park benches because she couldn't afford shoes, but played like her soul was on fire. The one who got noticed by a visiting professor who pulled strings, made calls, and got her a full scholarship to Vienna. Her music was imperfect, but alive, raw, animal, glorious. Until one rainy night, on the road to her first conservatory recital, a truck skidded through an intersection. She woke up 2 days later, her left arm in a cast. Her mother gone, Elena disappeared. From the program, from the records, from the stage. No goodbyes, no explanations. She never played again, not until now. Not as a student, not as a performer, but as a cleaner, a nobody. A woman they mocked for sport, and yet her hands still remember. The piano still waits, and the city of music is about to be reminded talent doesn't die, it waits. The Vienna Conservatory had never looked more radiant. Polished marble gleamed under chandeliers older than most countries. Velvet drapes kissed the parquet floors. A dozen grand pianos stood like sentinels in the main hall, their lids open in anticipation, waiting to sing. It was the eve of the annual gala, the most prestigious night of the conservatory's year, a celebration of legacy, a showcase of future legends. The atmosphere crackled with ambition and fear. Students rehearsed scales at breakneck speed. Professors whispered critiques sharp as razors. Photographers adjusted lighting. Cameramen scoped angles. The elite of the European music world would attend. Donneurs, scouts, agents, and above all, the judges. In the middle of this fevered elegance moved a woman with a mop. Elena Petrova swept under candelabras as priceless as her old dreams. No one looked at her twice, until he did. Madame Petrova, the voice rang out, loud and sugary with sarcasm. Heads turned. Lucas Reinhardt stood by the podium in a perfectly tailored velvet suit, his platinum blonde hair catching the light like a halo. He was the conservatory's golden boy, winner of 4 international competitions before age 20, heir to the Reinhardt musical dynasty, and insufferably aware of it. Elena paused. Her mop paused. Lucas grinned and gave a mock bow. "Would you bless us with your artistry?" A ripple of laughter broke out among his entourage. Students in designer shoes, clutching sheet music like it was scripture. Elena didn't respond. Lucas gestured grandly to the back of the hall. There, slumped in neglect, stood a battered upright piano. Its varnish was faded. Several ivory keys had turned yellow. 3 were missing entirely. The lid creaked open like a coffin. Let's see what those years of polishing have taught. This time the laughter was louder. A few phones were raised, some began filming. Elena stood still, stone, but inside her something cracked, not in shame, not this time, but in defiance. A flicker, then a flame. Something that had slept for over a decade stirred deep in her bones. She took off her gloves and walked slowly, like the gravity of 11 years was weighing down each step. No one spoke as she approached the piano. No one dared stop her. She sat. Not like a performer, not like a beggar, but like a woman who had finally had enough. Her hands trembled as they hovered above the keys. She pressed one. Wrong pitch. A shrill, ungraceful tone. She didn't flinch. Then she played. And the room forgot how to breathe. There was no technique in what Elena played. No calculated flair. This wasn't a performance. This was a confession. Her fingers moved like they were pulling something from the dirt, like each note was a secret she had buried, a memory she could no longer afford to hide. The melody started low, hesitant, then it rose, brittle, aching, like a woman calling out in a dream. Each chord cracked open something, a lullaby sung in a cold kitchen, a silent prayer outside a hospital door, the sound of her mother's last breath beneath broken windshield glass. The piano groaned under her will, as if remembering with her. Even the chipped keys found their voice. Even the silence between the notes seemed to sing. No one moved. Lucas's grin had disappeared. His phone, still recording, was trembling in his hand. For the first time in his life, he didn't have a comeback. He didn't have a clever line, because there was no name for what he had just heard, and no armor thick enough to deflect it. When Elena finished, her hands fell to her lap. She didn't bow, she didn't smile. She stood, picked up her gloves, and walked away, but the silence remained, and that silence said everything. By sunrise, the story had spread like fire in a drought-stricken field. The conservatory's inner circles buzzed. Instructors, once aloof, now whispered in break rooms, huddled like children sharing ghost stories. Did you see her hands? She never missed a note. That wasn't Chopin, that was something else. Students scoured the conservatory's archives, trying to trace a name that no one remembered. Elena Petrova became more than a janitor. She became a mystery. A question everyone needed answered. Who is she? It was Clara, a first-year violinist, with calloused fingers and a nervous stammer, who found her backstage 2 days later. Elena had resumed cleaning the back corridor of the recital hall, as if nothing had happened. But things had happened. A letter had arrived earlier that morning. Heavy envelope, gold-embossed seal. We invite Ms. Petrova to perform at the Vienna Conservatory's annual competition. She had stared at it for 5 minutes, then 10. Then she brought it close, not to read, but to tear. And yet, her hands wouldn't obey. They ached, not with arthritis, not with fatigue. They ached for music, for the feel of hammers and wire, wood and air. For the one thing she had denied them for over a decade. Elena? She turned. Clara stood in the doorway, clutching her violin case like a shield. I saw you play, she said, voice shaking. I stayed up all night watching the video. A pause, then a whisper. If I had half your soul, I'd be fearless. That was all it took. A thread, tugging, a crack in the armor. That night, Elena placed the mop in the janitor's closet and did not return for it. She didn't choose a Listitude or a Rachmaninoff concerto. She chose to write her own music. She called it Resurgence. It broke rules. Key signatures bled into one another like open wounds. Measures fought for breath. Some passages sang like lullabies. Others screamed. The judges would call it unorthodox. But Elena didn't write it for judges. She wrote it for herself. For the little girl in Sofia who played with frozen fingers in church basements. For the 21-year-old sobbing in a hospital hallway after signing her mother's death certificate. For every silent year since, when music was something she pushed down so deep it grew roots inside her bones. Every measure of resurgence was a scar, and every scar had a sound. The night of the competition, the conservatory's grand. Hall filled like a rising tide. Critics, donors, alumni, and most terrifying of all, the judges. Stern-faced, decades deep in musical pedigree. Their ears were sharper than knives. Elena arrived alone. No entourage, no makeup, no gown, just her old gray sweater, clean but fraying at the sleeves. When her name was called, murmurs echoed like wind through glass. That's the janitor. Is this a joke? She's not even wearing concert shoes. Lucas Reinhardt sat in the front row, arms folded, smiling, but not kindly. Elena walked to the Steinway and sat. No flourish, no bow, no preamble. Then, silence, and then the first note. It wasn't loud, it wasn't grand, it was honest. The kind of sound you hear only once, the sound of someone remembering who they are. Mid-breath, the melody began soft, too soft for applause, too sacred for commentary. Then it grew, a deep, aching swell that reached into the lungs of every listener and pulled. The music moved like time itself. A childhood marked by hunger, a mother's lullaby, the thunder of a car crash, the months that followed in absolute soul-ripping quiet, the slow, heavy steps of a woman mopping marble under chandeliers, and then a shift. Something changed. A modulation. The despair gave way to longing, then resilience, then finally, like light piercing through a boarded-up window, hope. The kind of hope that doesn't smile. It survives. Elena played like someone breathing for the first time, after drowning. Every phrase clung to life. Every pause pulsed like a heartbeat trying to find rhythm again. When the final crescendo arrived, it wasn't grand. It was defiant. And when the last note fell into silence, no one moved. No coughs. No whispers. No applause, yet. Because no one remembered where they were inside her and no one wanted to leave. The final note of resurgence didn't end. It dissolved. Like smoke curling into a cathedral's dome. Like a prayer whispered too late to be heard, but still sent anyway. Elena's fingers hovered above the keys, trembling. She didn't look up, didn't breathe. Her entire body was still a part of the sound, a tuning fork vibrating with everything she had just poured out. And the room said nothing. Not a cough, not a rustle. Only the gentle hum of the hall's chandeliers and the distant creak of wood as someone shifted in their seat. 5 seconds passed, maybe 10. In a world trained to respond with applause, this kind of silence was terrifying. Then, a single sound broke it. Clap. One man, standing, gray-haired, coat folded over one arm, face unreadable. Then another, and like a match dropped on dry leaves. The hall erupted, chairs scraped against marble. People stood, hands clapped, some too fast, some too loud, like they didn't know how else to express what had just been done to them. Tears ran openly. Even the critics, the ones who'd rolled their eyes at her name on the program, were now clapping with both hands and hearts. And then came the voice. Not a shout, not a declaration, a confession. From the front row, one of the judges, the oldest, rose slowly, hands folded in front of him like a man at confession. I have spent my life, he said, voice thick, listening to perfection. He looked around. I have heard brilliance, I have awarded virtuosity. I have been paid to admire polish and precision. He turned back to Elena, who was still sitting at the piano, motionless. But this was not perfection. This was the truth. The applause grew wilder, not polite, not obligatory, reverent. And in the shadows, near the side door, stood Lucas Reinhardt. His hands were in his pockets, his jaw clenched, He had watched the entire performance, every note, and something inside him, something built of pride and legacy and entitlement, had cracked. It wasn't just that she played better than him, it was that she didn't care who watched. She hadn't performed. She had survived, right in front of them. He remembered how she looked the day he mocked her, gloves on, mop in hand. He remembered the laughter, the sarcasm, the piano in the corner, and how he'd pointed at it like a king offering scraps to a beggar. And now, he couldn't meet her eyes, because now he wasn't the center of the room anymore. Now no one was filming him. No one was whispering his name. He wasn't the story. She was. A woman who had no spotlight, no sponsorship, no lineage to protect her. Just a past that bled into music, and hands that refused to forget. Lucas lowered his gaze, and for the first time since his childhood recital at age 8, he didn't feel like a prodigy. He felt like a student, of silence, of grace, of truth. Elena finally stood. She didn't bow. She didn't bask. She simply nodded, once, and stepped back from the piano, letting the instrument carry her name now, not her uniform. The lights above her dimmed slightly, casting a halo around her worn gray sweater. But in that moment, it looked like armor. The morning after her performance, the offers came in like a tidal wave. International agents, TV producers, record labels with 7-figure promises and embossed contracts. Everyone wanted Elena Petrova, the janitor who shattered Vienna's silence. Her inbox overflowed with invitations. Galas in Paris, premieres in New York, an exclusive solo album with the London Philharmonic. Journalists camped outside the conservatory begging for a soundbite. How does it feel to be discovered? Where have you been hiding? Do you regret wasting all those years? She didn't answer them. She didn't need to, because Elena hadn't come back for glory. She had come back for something far more permanent. She said no to almost everything. Turned down dinners, autographs, magazine shoots, but she said yes to one thing, a single offer. Simple, modest, to teach, not in the grand auditorium, not in front of donors or critics, but in room 11, the smallest classroom in the conservatory, the one next to the storage closet. Her first class arrived the following week. Not prodigies, not legacy names, not children of conductors or diplomats. They were the others, the students who played with hesitation in their fingers, who looked down when they spoke, who had been told they were talented but not enough, promising, but not elite. And among them, sitting in the second row, was Clara, the young violinist who once said, "If I had half your soul, I'd be fearless." Elena walked in, carrying only a folder and a small battered metronome. She placed a single sheet on each music stand. Resurgence. She let the silence sit with them for a moment. Then she said quietly, "I didn't come back to be praised." She looked at their uncertain faces. "I came back to pass on what I almost lost." They didn't clap. They didn't cheer, but they listened. And that was enough. Weeks turned into months. Room 11 filled with sound, not always perfect, not always in tempo, but always honest. Students began arriving early, staying late. They stopped trying to impress and started trying to feel. They played like people who had been seen, like voices long dismissed were finally allowed to speak. Elena never gave grades. She gave stories. Each note they played, she would ask, "What are you saying with it? What does this sound remember?" And slowly, they began to answer. Today, if you visit the Vienna Conservatory, you'll find a plaque near the stairwell. Simple bronze, no spotlight. It reads, "Elena Petrova, a voice from silence." And if you're lucky enough to pass room 11 on a quiet morning, you might hear it. A phrase, a passage, a pause. Soft, imperfect, human. A melody not born from privilege, but from pain transformed into hope. Not performed, but lived. And somewhere, inside it, you'll hear a reminder that the greatest music doesn't always come from those who were told they belong. Sometimes it comes from those who weren't, who dared to play anyway. If this story moved you, even just a little, take a moment to reflect on the quiet ones around you, the overlooked, the underestimated, the ones who listen more than they speak. Sometimes the soul of the world hides in the background, waiting. Not to be discovered, but to be heard. Share this story if you believe talent has no uniform. Leave a comment. Tell us, who was your Elena?